How are we doing, everybody? Today I have a super chill camera comparison video for you between the Canon C70 and the Fuji XT4. But before we get into any of that stuff, the most important thing that I wanted to talk about is the fact that we have lost a really important community member in the filmmaking and YouTube world. My friend Daniel Peacocke, who is just so incredibly talented at cinematography, and he made YouTube videos as well. He passed away last week, and it's been really hard for his family and for his friends and this community. He was a super big fan of the Kinfinity cameras, and it's been hard on that side of the community as well. So just wanted to, I don't know, put that out there because, I mean, cameras are awesome and they're really fun to talk about, but the most important thing is that talking about this stuff brings us together. I just wanted us to think about Daniel, you know, and honor him. So go check out his work. He has a YouTube channel that I'll link at the end of this video, and I talk about this more in my vlog that I posted yesterday, but let's get into the C70 and XT4. You might be thinking it's goofy that we're comparing these two cameras, but they actually have quite a few similarities, and we're gonna get into all of that. But the biggest difference really is the price. The Canon C70 is pretty dang expensive. The XT4 is super affordable. And so I just wanted to see if the footage actually compares, if the features compare. I do have a fully in-depth review of the XT4 that you can watch, and I have a C70 in-depth review coming next week. So if you want to see that, stick around, subscribe, do whatever you want. So to make the image comparisons as equal as possible, we're gonna be adapting the Sigma 18-35, I talk about that lens all the time, to the C70 and the XT4. So for the XT4, we're using the Fringer EF to X Pro 2 adapter, and for the C70, we're using the RF to EF adapter. So there's no speed boosting going on, it's just the Sigma glass hitting each of these sensors. There's no Pro Mist, nothing like that. However, with the XT4, we don't have built-in NDs like the C70, so I'll be using the Moment 2 to 5 stop variable ND, which I think is the best quality variable ND for the money, so we'll be doing that. Canon, we all know, is super famous for their dual pixel autofocus, and it's no joke in this camera, it's super good. It's not quite as good as the Canon R5 or R6, which have amazing tracking. This is just more of a stripped down version of the dual pixel autofocus, but it's still really reliable. I'm tracking my face right now, it's doing a great job. And we are shooting with the C70 and the Sigma 18-35 for this shot as well, just so you know. The XT4 is a whole different story. The autofocus is kind of sketchy in certain situations, but with the Fringer adapter and the settings that I've come up with, these settings right here, because I know everyone's gonna ask, you actually get pretty decent autofocus performance. It's not 100% reliable, but you can definitely get away with using it. And the last thing about the C70's autofocus is you have to give it plenty of light for it to pick up on a face like this or a subject. So if you're gonna be shooting underexposed, you're gonna get a lot worse performance. If you're gonna use it, make sure you give your subject plenty of light. For the Canon C70, you can shoot in 4K up to 120 frames per second. There's no cropping in on the sensor. It looks amazing. The quality's there, the 10-bit, the creaminess, you get it all. The autofocus is a little worse on this camera in 4K 120, and I believe you lose face tracking. I'll have to confirm and add that into the edit later right here. For the XT4, the maximum frame rate you can shoot at in 4K is 60 frames per second, so half the slow motion of the C70. And on the XT4, there is a slight crop in 4K 60, But until I Googled the specs a long time ago, I never would have known that there was a crop. It's very minimal. In HD with the XT4, you can go all the way up to 240 frames per second, which is kind of fun to play with, but it doesn't look amazing. It's kind of soft at 240. So we're just gonna keep it at HD 120 to compare those two. Obviously 4K is gonna look better and sharper than HD, but we're just having a goof and a gaff here. We're just enjoying our time. In the XT4, we get an IBIS system, and you can also enable digital IS with that and boost mode, but those can get kind of wonky. It can kind of add some weird warping and artifacting to your image. So I would just recommend using IBIS, and even with the regular IBIS, you gotta be careful because there are some weird jerking and wobbling movements on the sensor, so you just kind of gotta pick your battles. It works really well if you're standing in place filming a subject, but once you start moving, it can kind of get a little bit goofy.
Am I late for the fun with cameras workshop?
You want to join us? You look great.
But thank you.
Of course.
Take a photo of you?
Oh, by all means.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
What's your name?
Motorbike.
The C70 has digital IS that you can enable, and it actually seems to be really nice and fluid. It kind of flows with your shots, does a really good job. Still got to be careful not to move too much, but the option is there. Another thing to consider, the C70 is a lot heavier than the XT4, so shooting handheld, you're gonna get more stable footage. That's kind of one of the benefits of larger cinema cameras. They have that really nice, smoother handheld motion that I really love, and you can kind of get that with the C70. The XT4 is really lightweight and portable, which can definitely be a bonus. You can fly it on a gimbal, all that kind of stuff, but you do get more shaky movements handheld. All right, test number 4 is Filmmaking Functions, and this is where the C70 just pulls away and leaves the XT4 in the dust because of all the built-in filmmaking tools. We get built-in ND filters, which is crazy. It has a ton of customizable function buttons, waveform, my favorite exposure tool, false color. The screen quality itself is way better than the XT4. Also on the screen, you do get an assist LUT, but you can do that with the XT4 as well if you're shooting an F-Log. Unfortunately with the C70, you don't get an EVF, which is kind of goofy because it's such a huge body. You think they could have squeezed it in, but unfortunately you don't get that. Whereas you do get a really nice EVF on the XT4. Also with the Canon, you get 4 channels of audio with an analog limiter, which I'm so nerdy for because you don't have to worry about crazy high clipping, and a freaking huge battery so you can shoot for so long, which is really nice if you're doing any sort of event coverage or anything long form really. I feel like I'm off center. Am I off center? I don't know. For the XT4, you do get zebras, which is great, and a histogram, but that's it when it comes to exposure. I really wish they could do some sort of firmware update to add waveform, and my pipe dream would be freaking false color, because that would be just so nice. It's so fast to use, but at the very least, waveform would make the XT4 much easier to expose with, especially in daylight when that little screen is just being overwhelmed by the sun. Now the XT4, you do have pretty dang good battery life. It's way better than the XT3 was, but there have been a lot of cases of overheating with the XT4, especially in 4K 60. I've learned from some of you guys that if you disable IBIS, you'll actually be able to get less overheating. So your camera can run for longer times, which is really important, especially if you're shooting weddings in Texas, like I know some of you are out there. So just keep that in mind if you're outdoors shooting in hot conditions. Turning off IBIS will give you a little bit longer before your camera overheats. I don't want to just pick one of these cameras and tell you which one's better because first of all, they're way different prices and each of our eyes have completely different preferences. So I want to hear from you guys which one you think looks best. And it's just fun to compare these kinds of things. It doesn't have to be a feud between the Canonites and the Fuji juicers. We can all live in the land together and love one another, so be kind, please. Obviously, these two cameras were built for different purposes and at different price points, but they do share some really similar specs. One thing to keep in mind is that the XT4 is a professional and powerful photography camera, and it happens to also shoot really incredible 4K video up to 60 frames per second in 10-bit F-Log. It's a really just great tool to have in your toolkit, especially if you're balling on a budget. Now, the C70 is a total different beast. It was built to be a video and filmmaking first, workhorse camera, and it totally delivers on that. It's really nice to see Canon release something that hits really hard. All the specs you need are there. It's got the built-in NDs, the good autofocus, the beautiful colors. It's all there in this one package, although pricey, but it is reliable. I will say this, if you've been dreaming of the Canon C70, but maybe it would put you in a bad financial position, maybe just regroup, pull back a little bit, and take a peek over at the FUJI XT4. It has a lot of really nice features, some of them very similar to the Canon C70. I think it does better in low light actually, and overall, we know the images look great. Go watch my XT4 review. It was my very first video that I did by myself on this channel. Buy some merch if you're interested in wearing Canon, Fuji Juice, or Sony Simp to, represent the brand that you like. Subscribe so that you'll be automatically enrolled in my camera camp that we're doing later this year, and also you'll see the full C70 review that comes out next week. I hope that we can all just remember that our lives are short and it's important to make the things you want to make now. So go chase your dreams. Love you guys.